Welcome to episode 104 of the Forward from 50 podcast, where we interview people over 50 who are pursuing new direction for their lives. It's an opportunity for men and women to tell their stories, their way, and in their own words. I'm Greg Gerber, the founder of Forward from 50, and your host for today's show. Today I'm excited to introduce you to Julia Park Tracey. She's a journalist, poet, novelist, homesteader, and beekeeper whose life really took off after 50. From founding a newspaper and mentoring emerging writers to co-founding a publishing house that champions women over 50, Julia's story is proof that it's never too late to embrace your creativity and to make a difference. Nobody is more surprised at Julia's success than her teenage daughter, who informed her mother years ago that her life was over at 36. Get ready for a lively, insightful, and often hilarious conversation with a woman who's living her second act with purpose and passion. Please welcome Julia Park Tracey to the show. Thanks for joining me today, Julia. I really appreciate your time. I understand that you are over 50, but your life was actually over, according to your daughter, when you were 30. Is that right?
That's so true. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here today. Yeah, let me tell you this story. I have 3 daughters, and then I have also 2 stepchildren. But when I was previously married and I had my 3 daughters, my eldest was 14 and I was 36 at that time. So I had her when I was 22. And she said, I had told her no, she couldn't do something. And I don't remember what it was, but she said, "Mom, you have to let me do what I want because I'm 14 and my life is just starting and you're 36 and your life is over." But of course, I didn't get to do what she wanted to do because that was unacceptable. All she could see was me being a stay-at-home mom, which I did, which I stayed away from leaving the kids home alone and all that on purpose so that I could be there and keep them safe and bake bread and whatever it is that I did to volunteer and all that to make their lives as fabulous as I could make them. It's interesting. I got divorced from my ex-husband when I was late 30s, basically about 40. And at that time, I started a newspaper, which ran for 20 years. So I was the founding editor there. I had a novel that I had worked on previously, and that was published. I became poet laureate in the city of Alameda, and I held that position for 3 years. I traveled quite a bit, and I started a literary festival in the East Bay called Alameda Literati and got San Francisco Foundation funding for it. And some big name authors came to that. And I ran that for 4 years. What else? I started a literary magazine called Red Hills Review, and that ran for a couple of years as well. Then I remarried and I had 2 more kids. I didn't give birth to them, but they were my stepkids. So then I had 5 kids, and that's when I started doing I wrote from home, but for a while I was the editor of 2 glossy magazines. I was the associate editor at Oakland Magazine and Alameda Magazine. And then when I left those jobs to work from home and focus more on some urban homesteading, do beekeeping, chickens, gardening, what have you, live a more zero waste lifestyle. Mm-hmm. But I was working from home and I was editing a couple of other magazines from home and continuing writing and so on. And then my aunt died and I inherited her diaries, and I ended up publishing 2 volumes of her diaries. And then I turned 50 and kind of bounced from those successes into writing some more stuff and getting 3 more books published. 4 books published. So I had a collection of poetry published. I had 2 romance suspense books published, and the original novel was republished. This is all since 50. When my life was over, actually it really wasn't. It wasn't. And I heard someone say that turning 50 is like your second act. You've done kind of the child rearing and all that. And I've joked with my daughter for years, and she's actually turning 40 this week. So it's a good opportunity for teasing, and has been. I've enjoyed teasing her back very much. "Oh, how is life? You have no life anymore." But in any case, I've had nothing but adventures, exciting adventures and not that exciting adventures. I mentioned to you earlier that I had breast cancer last year, and that was at 60. And so I was unable to do any writing when I was in chemo because I couldn't remember words. It really does a number on your brain. Chemo brain is a real thing.
Wow.
But I took notes to myself to come back to this idea later when you can put two words together again. But anyway, yeah, all good.
It sounds like you have done a number of things after crossing that horrible 30-year mark.
Rubicon of
That's
36.
right. Exactly. You have been interested in writing for most of your life, though, right? This is something that you did not pick up after you turned 50, but you've been tuning it all along.
Yeah, I liked writing little stories of things when I was a child, but I didn't think about being a writer. My family, as a child, growing up, it was not a family that really encouraged the arts, except if it was like music or marching band, something like that. But that's not self-expression. Marching in line, yes, but
Right.
not music for self-expression. Marching in line for sure. So I did write poetry, but I didn't share it. And so I called myself a closet poet for years because it was very much not frowned on. Wake up, stop being a daydreamer, get to work, stop fooling around. So I knew I wanted to write. So when I went off to college, even though I went off undeclared, I essentially fell into journalism, and I ended up majoring in journalism and have had a career as a journalist, which led me to my editing. So I learned how to write an incredibly succinct and well-crafted first draft because when I started in journalism, we were still using typewriters and you didn't have time, and you certainly didn't have, computers were coming in when I was in college, and computer systems for editing and all that stuff. And I worked, of course, computers, my whole word processing and networking and blah, 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 all through my career. But when I started, literally, I went off to journalism school with a little zipper pouch that had an X-Acto knife, and we used the T-square and the wax rollers to literally lay out our papers, and the blue pencil for circling things because it was non-reproduction in the photography area. And oh my gosh, all that. Anyway, I learned how to write fast and write pretty well because you didn't get a second chance. And when they cut and pasted your story, they literally cut it up, rearranged it, and taped it back together, and then it went to the typesetter. You had one shot. And if your work was too shoddy, you wouldn't keep the job. They had to rewrite your work all the time. So you learned really fast. I'm pretty fast at drafting things to this day.
It sounds like you...
Oh, very fast typist.
So was I as well. The same kind of path through journalism and things like that, 100 words a minute at least, maybe
Right.
120. I don't think people can do that anymore, but yeah.
I don't think they can either. They don't have the clock issue, I don't think. Not in the same way, because you could always go, okay, I'll come back and do this later. But I learned how to just jump in, tell the facts, and then at the very end, you go back and write your lead at the top of the page because you leave a big space, and you go back and just write your lead because sometimes you don't know what the lead is until you're done writing the story.
Oh, I always had to have my lead first and then just write the story. That's it.
You had to, if you couldn't figure out what it was, you started telling what you could, but literally it was that inverted pyramid, the top part is the best, and if they had to cut, they would cut from the bottom, so that's why your least relevant stuff would be at the bottom. But sometimes if you got stuck on how to start I don't know what it is. I don't know what to say. I remember my journalism professor, one of them, Betty Metzger, she was amazing. She's still alive and still doing reporting and writing books and so on. But at San Francisco State was where I knew her. And she would say, if you roll up to a stop sign and your friend is in the other car and you only have the time at the stop sign and they say, what happened? And you have to tell them, that's your lead. Like the elevator pitch. They come to get.
That's great.
They talk about it for your book. But anyway.
It's like you ignored the critics who were telling you not to pursue the arts when you were getting younger. That's one of the most common things.
Journalism was supposed to be the practical way to write.
Okay.
It was like a real job. It was not, being a poet was not a real job. And I didn't want to teach. You have a vocation for teaching or you don't. It's really a thing about, are you a good instructor? And I'm impatient. I'm a very impatient person. I want stuff now. And then I also want to be writing my own stuff. So I do occasionally teach, but I don't have that vocation in the way that some people are so good at teaching. They're so good at sharing that. And I can do a little bit. I'm better at mentoring one-on-one. I have mentored a lot of women in their writing, and I pick any men, one or two, but mostly it's been women, young women who didn't know that their work was already publishable and they were still looking for approval or whatever. And it's, you got this. And these women have gone on to get agents and be published and just winning accolades. And it's wonderful to watch. That I'm good at. I just don't feel like I'm a good teacher. So I was not encouraged to go to school to teach English or teach poetry. Reading good books and writing is a lot of fun. So therefore, it's not a real job. Right? I was very much raised in a kind of a puritanical, dour sort of household where fun equals chaos and chaos is not allowed. So let's pipe down, everybody just button your lip, knock off all that laughter, sit down and do your work. And there's no such thing as boredom because there's always work. So it's very puritanical. Don't waste time, idle hands and all that stuff. So reading good books like even Mark Twain and Jane Austen and all that, no, that's fun. That's for fun times, which is later. Maybe in bed you can read for a little bit, but get your nose out of a book and get to work was the regular call. So
that's right.
I didn't even know it was an option, really. I saw what some other people were studying. I'm like, you could take a whole course on reading English literature or what? And writing poetry, that's a thing. And short story, that's a thing. I didn't even know I could do it. So I went into journalism because I had this burning desire to write, and I knew I would get paid. Of course, they were paid like crap. We were never paid.
I love that you are mentoring younger people because that is something that people over 50 can easily do. And it's amazing 100%. The impact that we can have on younger folks just by giving them that encouragement. They know in their heart they might desire to do this, but the rest of the world is discouraging them from pursuing that direction. So having a mentor who believes in them and their skills and opens the door to that possibility can be a profound impact on the lives of others.
Who I would have ended up to be if I had a mentor, that's an interesting question. I was talking with someone and I realized that when I talk to my cat, I'm like, oh, you're such a pretty girl. Oh, I love you so much. And I thought, if we talk to our children the way we talk to our cats, if I had been talked to the way I talk to my cat, I would be a very different person today. My poetry would be vastly different, I'll tell you that. I would probably have nothing to write about because I would be, flowers and rainbows.
So when did you start a publishing company?
In a sense, I did help found a newspaper in my 40s.
Okay.
So I had experience in running a publication from soup to nuts. I did everything from literally delivering papers in the rain when the delivery folks bailed and pouring rain, trying to keep the newspapers dry. I took the flats to the printer. I folded invoices and stuffed envelopes and licked envelopes. I did the calendar. I did the police report. I went to City Hall. I covered death and maiming and murder and fire and dog shows, children's play. I did everything on that paper, everything. And not all at once, but sometime or another, I did everything, including sports, which is, I don't know, sports. I could fake it, right? I could
absolutely
work. So because I had that experience and I had a solid 10 years in office and then freelance as an editor, I had a very good editor's eye. And then I had this one novel I told you that was published after I was 40. At some point I realized I did know how to write fiction. It wasn't just nonfiction. So I was writing that through the 20 teens. I was doing that and going to writers' conferences and getting some really good feedback and connecting with agents and so on. Anyway, once I turned 50, though, I felt like I could not get a return phone call. I got very much it wasn't AI quite yet, but it was a stock answer of, yeah, this is great, whatever, or nothing, dead silence. And even agents who said, oh my God, your work is amazing. Then I never heard from them again. And so in commiserating this back in 22, summer of 22, my longtime friend, Vicky, who I met in college, and we were both go-getters in our own way, we both were commiserating because after being 50, after 50, we could not get a phone call back. And we thought, it's because the publishers really want these young folks at the beginning of their careers who, are going to cough up 10 books. I'm also coughing up 10 books because I have them already written. I have them written. They just hadn't been published. So I have the same value to a publishing company as someone at the beginning of their career, but my skill is honed. And so anyway, because of that, Vicki and I were talking over, and I had this manuscript that had been lauded by several agents, and then I was ghosted. And I'm talking more than 100 agents that I had sent it out to, and they would say, "This is amazing," and then I would never hear back from them again. And I just thought, am I going to just leave these under the bed and then die, or what am I going to do? So Vicki had successfully run a book publishing company in the 80s and 90s in San Francisco. And then she had worked in bookstores and she had run events and so on. And we put our heads together and we got another gal who'd worked in the book trade with cover design and interior design and also the stuff like logos and all that. She is amazing, a book designer and just designer, graphic designer. And the fourth partner ended up being a woman who's really good with rights and licensing. So we covered the 4 peaks that we needed: the marketing person, the graphics person, the contracts and licensing, and the editor. And so we started reaching out and saying, we're going to do this. We're going to do publishing, but for women 50 and older. Someday we may do men 50 and older, but we're not seeing the need. We're not seeking those out. We're not saying that we will never publish men. Or we hate men. It's none of that. We're all married and happily married and with sons and what have you. But just seeing that women of a certain age become invisible or as the younger folks say, and you'd have to bleep this, if it was not sexy anymore, not seen. And so who cares what women over 50 have to say? But it turns out we're like at the peak of our powers. We've written for 30 years, most of us, and you can see the craft on the page. The story's amazing. So we did that, and I was doing editing for the first year and a half, but I have stepped back. I'm still one of the original 4, but I really need to write my own stuff, so I'm not really running the company day to day or anything at this point.
Something important to consider is that a lot of people over 50 have the knowledge that they can put into the books and the experiences and the wisdom and things like that they should be sharing, that the younger folks are just learning about. So they're really talking from theory, whereas people over 50 are talking from experience and practical wisdom. So I'm glad 100%. That you are embracing that for these women over 50 and giving them a venue for doing that. So if somebody has a book idea, can they bring it to you? Is that what you're looking to do? Or do they have to write the book and then bring it? Okay.
No, we don't. We're not doing nonfiction except memoir. And let me clarify on a couple things. First of all, the name of the company is Sibylline Press, Sibylline. Sibyl. The name Sibyl comes from the wise women, the Roman wise women, and that they held the Sibylline books, which were books of knowledge. And people who wanted some imparted wisdom would go see the Sibyls. So the Sibylline Press is about the wisdom of wise women, older women. So that's what the name means. The company is publishing memoir and then all kinds of fiction. And when I say memoir, I don't mean your whole life story from the day you were born until yesterday. And also, I don't mean your victim story where this terrible thing happened and woe is me. What we're looking for in a memoir would be the arc of a story, where if your whole life is 180 degrees, I'm looking for 15 to 20 degree segment of that, a segment of your life story where you experienced something and triumphed in some way. There needs to be a triumph because we're not interested in publishing victim stories.
Nobody likes victim stories.
It just doesn't serve. And that's not something that I want to read about. Oh, she lost and then everything went terrible. It was bad. In fiction, there's ways that you can get away with not having a happy ending, but it's really hard to read someone's life story just to feel like, oh my God, yikes. I don't want to be that. You don't want people feeling like that about your life. So we're talking about if you had an illness that you survived, if you climbed Mount Everest, it came back down again. Obviously, these are just cliches. Actually, we get a lot of illness stories or I took care of my husband with Alzheimer's kind of thing. And if we've already published a book like that, we're not going to publish the same one again, but we're actually publishing a really beautifully written, funny, wise, sweet, amazing story coming up about a woman who, at about age 45 to 50, realized she'd been a Midwestern housewife her whole life, and she fell in love with a Pilates instructor and realized that she was lesbian, and how that upended her whole kind of middle America life. And she's thriving, and her children love her and support her. But it was pretty brutal what she went through. So that's an amazing story that's coming up, I believe. Is it in the fall? It might be in the fall, this coming fall of 2025. We have some other memoir about, actually, there's one that's just out today that is a young woman whose mother jumped off a cliff into the ocean. And she's like, why? And it was her coming to terms with her mother's choice to end her life after she lost her beloved husband. So she basically had two losses. But how do you come to terms with that kind of grief? That's an interesting story, too. It's a hard story. They're hard stories. It's okay to read a hard story, but we like to know that you'll survive it. And
Right.
It's not an instruction manual, but it's just a way of living through something tough. And then we have a couple of other of that kind of memoir. There's a really funny one that's also coming out. Is it this spring? I think it's coming out maybe in May. And it's called something Stardust. Chasing Stardust or something like that. And it's about this young girl in the 80s in basically Hollywood, Los Angeles, who fell in love with Warren Beatty. And it's all about chasing Warren Beatty for years and trying to get him to see her and fall in love with her, which of course he didn't. So it's this really funny story of the setting is LA in the 80s, and it's got all kinds of drug stuff and body shaming and hot summer nights, every cliche, but it's so funny. And she ends up being a showrunner on the Dennis Miller Show and the Conan O'Brien and a bunch of different. She ends up in Hollywood, and it runs into these same people over and over again. And some of it is just hilarious. Some of it's yikes. But it ends up now, that Warren Beatty is in his 80s, and she's been friends with him all these years. And I don't remember any of that. I don't remember anything. I remember any of the stuff that happened. Wild threesomes and jumping out of airplanes and all this crazy stuff. So it's about chasing Warren Beatty.
Younger people seem to be attracted to these always perfect influencers who live the perfect lives and never do anything wrong. I think it's unrelatable to people. And as people get older, they identify with imperfect people, but love to hear the stories about how they overcame the problems that they have. So I like that you're doing that. That's a great opportunity for women to really express themselves in that way as overcomers, not as victims.
Yeah, it just doesn't, especially it's a fraught political world right now where there's a lot of uncertainty, and it's good to have role models. And if you read someone's memoir, you can really say, oh my gosh, she got through some amazing stuff. I could probably get through some stuff too. We're also totally doing fiction, so don't get me wrong. It's not just memoir. In fact, I'll be honest, memoir does not sell super well. For a while it had its time in the sun, and memoir was doing really well, and now it's not doing so well in trade paper. But it's still important to have it, to promote it and publish it. But these things come and go, trends and fads and what have you, as an antidote to the Britney Spears and the Kim Kardashians of the world. Ordinary people surviving extraordinary things, I think,
That's right.
is worth putting out there. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to be Britney Spears, not going to be Kim Kardashian. I'll never have people kissing my fingers and rolling out red carpets before me, but I've been through some things and I like to tell my story like anyone else.
How did you get involved in beekeeping?
Beekeeping. So in the 90s, they closed the government. I think it was under Bill Clinton, closed a lot of military bases. And so the city would then have to take over that space and try to figure out, do the creative reuse on what were they going to do with the old officers club and the old housing and what have you. And some of them have done some really cool things. They've made beautiful parks and all that. Of course, they all had to have like super fun cleanup because there was radium in the water and nuclear waste and all just crazy stuff like that. But so I was living in Alameda, and when I married my current husband, I had 3 daughters before he had 2 children. So suddenly we had 5 children, and we could not afford a house for 7 people, but we rented a house out on the former Navy base in Alameda, which was, they had officers' houses. And so they were actually not terribly pricey. It was as affordable as anything else. And so we had suddenly had a 5-bedroom house that we could rent, and they didn't care what we did with the yard. So I put in a big old vegetable garden. It was literally chain link fence and crabgrass, and for acres, because they had these big spaces in between the houses. So you could set up, we had a volleyball net outside of the yard, and it's like one of those like Midwestern yards where there's just rolling acres. And so a big yard with lots of extra outside grass. So I did eminent domain, and I planted stuff on the outside. I planted pumpkin vines that went creeping along, and I just kept making the yard bigger, but planted all different kinds of things. And then we got some chickens, and the chickens were great because then we'd get our own eggs, and I let them fly loose during the day, and then they'd come back at night. And I had a neighbor, one of my neighbors there, is actually a really cool guy. His name is Jack Mingo, and he's the guy who coined the term couch potato back in the 80s. And he's written a ton of books, and usually they're like trivia bathroom books, the kind of thing you're like, it's going to read this for 5 minutes, but you'll have a page all about whatever. It could be anything. It could be Mount Rushmore or what. Anyway, he was a beekeeper, and he had been working with his bees for so long, but he got more and more sensitive to the stings, and he went into anaphylactic shock at one point. And so then he was not allowed to beekeep on his own anymore. So he asked me if I would come and help. So I learned how to do everything, how to suit up, how to use the smoker, how to check for brood, see how much honey was there, how to process the frames to get the honey out. And I did it because I just found it fascinating. All the bees are female. The queen, of course, is female. There's drones for a couple days in the spring, and then who mate with the queen, and then then they die. And every bee that you see out there is female. Chances are it's 99.9% that it's a female. They take different roles. They can be nurse bees taking care of the babies. They can be bees that take care of the inside of the house and sweep and clean the hive. They're pretty brutal. If a bee is injured, they'll like take it and put it outside. Out you go. It's tough luck, baby. They're also, what do they call them? Mortician bees? I don't know. They will like clean up and get rid of anyone who's not serving the hive. I just find it fascinating.
I've seen just the opposite, though. I've seen people take bees that are covered in spider webs and drop them outside of a hive, and the bees come out and start picking the web off the bee to restore it to health. So they are amazing.
And if it's, I guess, a really old bee or it's sick or something.
It's over 50.
It's just, if it's over 50 and doesn't have anything interesting to say. Brutal.
That's right. So this is
on the ice squelch.
This is what got you interested in homesteading as well, and developing your own vegetable gardens and things like that. You're still doing
Well, yeah, it was when we were out there on this abandoned place. And how do you make something out of nothing? So I had a blog for a while. I was writing a regular newspaper column about it. I think it was called not Green Scene, Backyard Bliss or something like that. And I was just like, we started with nothing, but this week, this is what I did. And canning and fermenting, and how do you live a zero waste life? I did a month-long no plastic challenge. How can I order a pizza and have it not come covered in plastic? How can I potato chips or tortilla chips, but not have them in plastic. And actually, you can if you buy them from a Mexican restaurant and it comes in a paper bag. You don't have to have plastic. You can bring your own foil to the pizza parlor and get your pizza wrapped in foil instead of plastic. There's things you can do. You can go bring your own containers and go to bulk purchase stores and so on. In the beginning, I despaired because I'm like, I'm going to end up with what? Jelly beans and cream cheese and I think a carton of milk. But so many of the cartons of milk have that stupid little plastic screw in, now.
Yep.
So it's a challenge, and not everyone can afford yogurt in a glass jar, which is like $10. That's so you make your own. I didn't like my own. It had a funky taste to it. And I tried it several times and I could never get it to taste like I was used to. So I didn't want to do that. I'd just live without yogurt. What else? Buy your toilet paper individually, wrapped in paper. Scott toilet paper that comes individually. But things come wrapped in plastic. There's so much, I call
There's
it
a lot of
ambient plastics everywhere. And how do you cut back? How do you get rid of it? Buy things in glass jars or make it at home so anyway, I just felt like we needed to make an effort at living a more green lifestyle, less impact, less consumerism, secondhand, less food waste. So composting, buying reasonable amounts of things and then preserving it in the freezer or sharing it with your neighbors if you had too much. That kind of thing. So I always say I'm a total tree hugger. And in fact, I started saying I'm an ecosexual because I don't care who you love as long as you don't mess up the planet, right? I'm an ecosexual.
Are you teaching people this right now?
I do talk about it and I write about it on my Substack, which is basically you can find me on any social media platform under my complete name, Julia Park Tracey, with an @ symbol in front of it. And if you look for me, you will find me except on X, which I'm not on X. I am on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, Substack. I was on Medium. I don't do much on Medium, but I have a website. Again, Julia Park Tracey, all one word. So I don't know. I just feel part of it is, I think, being raised by parents who lived through the Great Depression and World War II.
Right.
And I think they were savers and scrimpers, and my father's a nail straightener, and he'll pound out a nail and put it in a coffee can in case they need it. And they roll up string and a ball.
That's what they did back then. Yes.
Wash their foil and use it again. I wash plastic bags and I'll use them as many times as I can. And then I put them into a big bag and I take them back to the grocery store. And our local Rotary does collect them and it gets made into those Trex things that you use on your deck.
Okay. That's interesting. If you could roll back the clock, is there anything that you would do differently?
I really wish that I had more confidence in my writing at a younger age. I really did buy into the idea that my writing was frivolous. And that's why I was a closet poet for years. Nobody knew I wrote poetry. And it was the whole experience of coming out and being brave and showing what I had to write. They talk about as writers, it's like walking down the street naked and unshaven. 3 times more humiliating than you think it will be. At least the potential is there. And I wish I'd had more confidence. I wish I'd been mentored. I wished I'd been spoken to like I speak to my cat. But the one thing that my dad always said that is true is suffering builds character.
And it does?
Actually does. If you have not been through some things, then you're not going to have the resources, the toolkit in order to deal with other things. And you do see that like with kids whose parents fix everything for them, then they don't know how to boil water and they don't know how to get out of jail or whatever if someone's not there fixing it for them. So it is important that you develop a patina that you rub up against difficulties and figure out how to get through those things. For one thing, it makes a more interesting memoir. For another thing, it makes you a more compassionate, empathetic person for other people going through hard times. It makes you a better, well-rounded person altogether. And we really need more empathy and compassion right now. I see that basically every social service is going to be slashed in this crazy new administration. So it's the time to get to know your neighbors and plant an extra row in your garden for hungry people and think about how you can be there to support your neighbors if we aren't going to have the social safety net that we always thought we'd have.
But that's the way it used to be years ago, is the neighbors helped each other, and we've turned that thing over to the government. So maybe coming back will make us more human altogether.
I think that actually is really true. The other thing is, life does not end after 50. And I'm going to tell you, I happen to have very long-lived relatives. My father is 98, and he says he's got another 10 years to go. No, not 10, but I do think he'll hit 100. And my mother's 90. She's doing great. And her forebears on both sides, 98, 99, 100, 101. I just turned 62 yesterday. So I'm looking at close to 40 more years to go. So for one thing, I don't have enough savings. I'm going to have to keep working and writing more books, and hopefully people will read them. But also, it's important to take care of your body so that you're not going to end your days curled in a ball in some institution somewhere or dying of preventable diseases and what have you. Take care of your teeth. Try to eat some fiber once in a while. Take vitamin if you can't eat properly, because that stuff will kill you early.
That's right.
But it's also, I think it's important to keep taking classes. Take a class at the adult school. Keep learning things. I'm actually taking a class this weekend on grafting. I'm going to see if I can learn how to graft a fruit tree and make one of those fruit salad trees in my yard. I think that would be really a cool skill to have, right? So there's that. And I'm using Duolingo, and I took German when I was in junior high and high school. I took 5 German, and I can't say anything except for hello and how to talk. Wie geht's? So I'm on like day 40 something of my, since the new year, of relearning German, and keep your brain moving. Learn new things. Pay attention. Don't be too insular. It's good and meet new people. It's good to try new things. One of the things that my husband and I do, try something new on the menu when you go out. Don't always have the same thing.
That's a good idea.
Oh. I've never had sizzling rice soup. What if I try it this time? I always have egg flour soup, but because I like it. What if I try something? What if I try the gingerbread latte? I personally suffer from, what if I don't like it? What if I don't like it? And then I'll have to eat it. I have missed out on the whole experience of having a latte. Try it. And then, do you like pumpkin spice latte, or you just hate them because everyone else likes them? I don't.
Exactly.
And here's the other thing. My husband and I we try to do a weekly date. And that date is, let's go to one of the little places nearby that we've never been. So yesterday for my birthday, we drove like less than 10 miles from our house. And there's a covered bridge, which is like the longest covered bridge apparently in the world. 229 feet, single span bridge in the foothills here in California. Has been here since 1860. It is a gorgeous feat of engineering, less than 10 miles from our house. A beautiful sunny day. We had a nice walk. There's hikes around there. It crosses the Yuba River. Absolutely gorgeous for the cost of a parking at a state. And guess what? You can go to your library. Many libraries carry free passes for your state parks. So you can get a free pass to your state park or pay the senior thing. I absolutely love getting the senior discount. That makes me so happy.
Especially for the national park passes. That's the best deal out there. Yes.
So I'm telling you. Yeah. So try new things. Don't be afraid to try new things. And also, don't be a big baby about, I don't know how to use the technology, and I'm not going to learn it. I don't know how to use it. We can learn new things. I think it's important to show younger people that we're not doddering idiots. We can learn new things. We're smart. We are smart. We have all this experience, and we can figure out new things. So I know how to make a website. I know how to use TikTok. I pay attention to stuff so that I'm not going to walk around and talk about my Riz and my fit and my blah, blah, blah. But I like to know what's going on so that I can recognize it in speech and recognize it in writing that comes through as an edit. I just want to hear it so that I know. So watch the Super Bowl halftime show and don't be scared. Just because you don't know it doesn't mean it's not good.
That's great advice. People can get in touch with you at juliaparktracey.com. And that's where they can purchase any of your books. You have
Actually, you can go to Amazon, you can go to bookshop.org, you can go to Barnes and Noble, Target, Walmart. Any of those places carry my books. I don't know. Where else would you buy books?
Barnes and Noble?
Or if you look carefully. Yeah, Barnes and Noble, or any place that carries books. And I believe sometime in the new year that the Audible books are out there on 1, 2, 3, 4 of mine, 5 of mine now. You can borrow them from your library. You can ask your library to carry them.
Are you reading them?
And
are you the voice behind the Audible books?
I am not the voice behind. Now, I have a face and a voice, a face for radio, but I don't have the voice for radio. I'm a little too nasal or something. And everything I say is one long sentence. I never take a...
I would second that. It's funny.
So, yeah, no, I do. The company that does the recording likes memoir authors to do their own books, but not fiction authors. I'm not an actor. I just...
Exactly. You need to have that kind of acting voice and the different tones and the pauses and things like that. That's what makes fiction interesting. You might not need
to write something amazing.
Exactly.
And if they can take it and run with it, that would be great. But can I a little bit about my books before we go?
Sure, yes.
Yeah, so the 2 books that I have out as historical fiction with Sibylline Press came out last year, and this 23 and 24. And the first one is called The Bereaved, like the sad person, The Bereaved. And it's based on my 3rd great-grandmother, who was a poor widow who put her children in an orphanage while she tried to work, and they sent all 4 of her children out on the various orphan trains, which was a whole movement for 80 years. It wasn't just one train. Repeated trains every week. They were sending kids out from New York out into the Midwest. And she did not intend for that to happen. So she wrote repeatedly to ask for her kids back. And when I had to do all this research, genealogical research to find it, and she got 3 of the 4 kids back. The 4th kid was the baby, and I descend from the baby. So we didn't know about who his parents were until I did all this research and then figured it out. So anyway, the story is told from her point of view, the mother's point of view, about how hard things were as a widow in 1850, 1860, as the Civil War was coming. And then when they sent her kids to New York, to Illinois, to Ohio, how did she get her kids back in the middle of the Civil War? And she was able to collect 3 of them up again, but not the last. And so that story is based on a true story. The next book that just came out this last year is called Silence, and it is based on my 7th great-grandmother, Silence Greenleaf. Her real name was Silence, and she lost her mother, husband, and newborn infant within a matter of 6 months. And as the novel says, as she was crying her grief aloud and saying, "Why, God? Why would this happen?" It was a Puritan. And they slammed her for questioning God and gave her a year of silence as her punishment.
Oh, my.
So she needed to be silent for a year. And this is the story of that year. Now, it's fictionalized, obviously. She did have those losses, and then she eventually did marry the doctor. But that's what the story is about, is like, how did she... It's a story of grief, and it's a story of oppressive religion and the silencing of women. And so it has absolute reflection on today's society. Both of these are literary fiction, and they both were noted by Kierkegaard's reviews in the top 100 indie fiction in 23 and then in 24. Each received that accolade, starred reviews and so on.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Neat to have those kind of awards to recognize what you've been pouring your heart and soul into for so long.
Absolutely.
That's right. And so are the books available on your website as well?
My website, it will refer you to where to buy the books. Okay. But yeah, you could just look up my name on any platform where you buy books. And then, so those are my 2 historical fiction. And then I have the 2 contemporary romance, 2 spicy, 2 hot pepper spicy. Okay. That's the rating. Not 0 hot peppers, not 5 hot peppers. 2 hot peppers, spiciness, and this is Veronica Lane Gets the Scoop, and Veronica Lane Has a Nose for News, and these are based on my journalism experiences. But it's hot romance, chasing after whatever the story is and trying to get the scoop, or she has a nose for news.
Is that part of your star? The spiciness, is the spiciness part of your story as well?
Fiction, my friend, fiction. Yeah, it's not possible to chase stories and have wild sex at the same time. It's one or the other.
It's only in fiction. That's right. Oh, so.
But anyway, so those two are available in ebook, and a print version will be available. A print on demand version will be available soon. And then the other one is Tongues of Angels, and that is a literary fiction, and it is about a priest trying to decide if he should stay a priest or get married because he's torn. So it's a love triangle between a priest, a woman, and God. But it's very kind of irreverent. It's a little too spiritual and a little too profane at the same time. It's a little of both because it's told from the inside. And there's this kind of Greek chorus of priests who gather and gossip and talk about the different things are happening. That is in print and in ebook. And also, all of them are in audio. All 5 of those are in audio.
Awesome. Thank you very much for sharing your story with me today, Julia. I appreciate it. And I hope people check out your website and, more importantly, your books to learn more about you and what you're passionate about through your fiction and other writing.
Greg, I so appreciate the invitation, and it's been great chatting with you today. Thank you.
What a fun conversation with Julia Park Tracey. From the moment her teenage daughter declared her mother's life was over at 36, Julia has been on a mission to prove otherwise, and she's done it in spectacular fashion. After raising her children, Julia reignited her writing career, published multiple novels, including historical fiction and spicy romance. She also co-founded Sibylline Press, a publishing house devoted to elevating the voices of women over 50. Julia's passion doesn't stop at the page. She's also a dedicated urban homesteader and beekeeper, growing her own food, living with minimal waste, and doing her part to care for the planet. Whether she's harvesting honey, canning vegetables, or teaching others how to live more intentionally, Julia shows us what it means to live a purpose-driven life in the second half. Her story is a beautiful reminder that creativity doesn't expire and wisdom only grows with age. If you'd like to learn more about Julia, check out her books and blog at www.juliaparktracy.com or follow her on many social media platforms. Just look for her at Julia Park Tracey. If you're over 50 and wondering what's next for your life, then take Julia's advice to try something new, stay curious, and never stop designing or telling your story. That's all for this week's show. If you'd like to start living a more meaningful life, I encourage you to download our free guide to finding purpose, which is available at www.forwardfrom50.com. I'll have another inspirational interview on the next episode of the Forward from 50 podcast. Thanks for listening, and if you like this show, please consider leaving a review wherever you download the episodes.